Hello and welcome, brothers and sisters of the multiverse. Today I want to talk about the golden rule. What is the golden rule? Something that echoes throughout many different religions and spiritual beliefs. That what unites, so to say, all of them. It's like Kant's categorical imperative or something. His cardinal of virtues and all of that. The baseline of all that could be considered good and as a belief enough, as a single simplified rule on how to deal with each other, how to interact with each other and the world and nature and everything. And so many people are talking about the same thing, just in different ways. And they're even so absurd, they even fight of the interpretation of the same thing, the core essence of the meaning behind it. Without realizing they're talking about the same thing, the same values. It's really quite simple. Check this out. I picked out only a few of them and wrote it down as I was listening to the audiobook of Emma Goldman's Anarchy and Other Essays. What stand out to me is not the rejection of faith as such, but of the institutions that corrupted something that we already, most of us, had within us. She didn't attack the sacred itself, she attacked the cages built around it. The ways of putting those rules together in a way that's supposedly should serve humanity as a whole, but were twisted into forms of control. It used fear and obedience to replace what was already present in the human heart, the natural sense of empathy and fairness. The natural sense, what we all feel, what our intuitions are telling us. But they also distort our natural feelings towards certain rules, let's say. because we're not all the same. We don't value the same things, we don't appreciate the same rules and such, and that doesn't mean that the ones are better than the others. Sometimes, yes, there are also those, always, of course, but I'm talking about the majority. As long as this golden rule applies, anything that two people do, or 10 or 2 million, that is in agreement and in consent with each other, it's not any business of any religious institution or government to say no, as long as they're informed, mature adults, true adults, not just calendar-wise, you know. They truly know what they're doing. Okay, so let's go with those people. Peter Kropotkin saw it in nature and called it mutual aid. Even in the wild, cooperation sustains life more than competition. That is the natural anarchy of existence. Order without authority. When we talk about nature and all the Hobbesian way and Homo homini lupus and all of that stuff, right? That's what's been drilled into generation after generation to have an excuse for so-called ruling class, governments and all of that. That is simply not true. They're showing us the certain wildlife channels and such, only murder and bloodthirsty animals and stuff, but that is just simple survival and just like 3% of what those animals are doing, because it's more impactful, sadly, for whatever reasons, than a tigress licking the head of her offspring to clean it and show affection and stuff, you know. That side is the 97% or so. Care, play, protection of one another, sharing. Yes, mostly hierarchical, but that's also only because those who should stay strong to protect the group, you know. And I know, that's the thing, right? They might say, but that also counts for the government. They all of our taxes to keep us safe. Nowadays, we would need protection from them. So, anyway. Lao Tzu said the same thing in another way. He saw that the Tao needs no ruler. When we stop forcing life orders itself. The best leader, he said, is one who makes himself unnecessary. Swedenborg found that same principle on the spiritual plane. He said heaven is structured by love of others. Each being lives for the good of the whole as naturally as for themselves. He called it the divine order. Jesus said it directly. The kingdom of God is within you, not some church. He wasn't founding a religion. He was dissolving the need for one. The Golden Rule was never meant to build a church. It was meant to awaken the human conscience. Buddha taught compassion as the foundation of wisdom. That separation is illusion. I said that in my intro video. And to harm another is to harm oneself. What he called karma is just Golden Rule seen from the side of cause and effect, right? The Stoics said it differently, and the same. Marcus Aurelius wrote that what benefits the hive benefits the bee, and that we are born for cooperation. For them, virtue was not obedience but harmony with the Logos, the rational soul of the universe. The Logos is such an interesting concept. It entails and yet transcends the so-called soul of the universe, right? Not something that could be described and defined, but also like neti-neti principle, right? It's not this, it's not that. It can't be universal intelligence, however you want to call it God, whatever. It's all the same thing. And I mean that beyond the distortion of the demiurge of the same. That's not the natural order. That's just why we have troubles everywhere you look, with everything. That's not the natural order. That's not how he, she, it made this in the first place. The natural order was before the so-called fall. It's kind of the version of Adam and Eve before the snake, right? Spinoza saw it too. He said blessedness arises when we recognize ourselves as parts of the infinite substance. Then love is no longer duty, it is understanding. Einstein said that a human being is part of a whole, called by us universe, part limited in time and space, who experiences himself as something separate. That illusion, he said, is a prison. And our task is to free ourselves by widening our circle of compassion, to embrace all living beings and the whole of nature. It's also interesting, right? If theologians and scientists and materialistic reductionists and from all sides they all come to the same quintessence of the core that just speaks all these different languages. You see it everywhere, in the micro and the macrocosm. Krishnamurti spoke of freedom not as rebellion but as understanding. He said that when we truly see, compassion ends, conflict ends, comparison ends, conflict ends, and compassion appears naturally. For him, love was intelligence in its purest form. Yes, I mentioned that too in a video with the example of children. Until a certain age, until a certain level of indoctrination, let's say, all are compassionate, empathic, sharing, playful, not concerned with what others might think and stuff, like. And wasn't it Jesus that also said, until we become like children, like those, like that, just living from the heart, not the ego, that we enter the kingdom of heaven, right? That's who we are before we forget, before we get gotten persona, right? Before the ego took over. Erich Fromm said that love is not a sentiment but a discipline, a capacity for care, respect and responsibility. That maturity begins when we shift from seeking to be loved to learning how to love. Giving love, giving in general, is counterintuitively more fulfilling when we share, when we love, not only do we make those who we love appreciated and all warm and fuzzy, but our own hearts open and fulfill us with joy. When we make others happy, we make ourselves happy, right? Martin Luther King Jr. expressed the same insight in the language of justice, that we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. It's a ripple effect, right? if we make someone miserable, he or she encounters others to whom that person would, also be all stressed and such. And if you bring a smile to someone's face, that smile will ripple out also, And it is not to say not to be authentic, quite the opposite. Just recognize the other behind the mask. Not naively, not in a blind way, but just and it's hard nowadays, I know. With that stressful lives, most people don't even get to be themselves. But all those negativities, let's say, are just a surface picture of someone. It's just they're not aware of themselves, of their true self. And what the ego gets, it puts out threefold, fivefold. The understanding also that most things those people say or do has, on the one hand, nothing to do with you, so it's nothing personal. On the other hand, even if they believe it's personal, what they mean by that is their picture of you in their mind. So if they're criticizing you for what you truly are, that's something else. Then if they criticize your mask that yourself are sometimes wearing, consciously or subconsciously, or semi-subconsciously, or something, that's a big differentiation. But being aware of all that helps you still get along better with others and with yourself with others. You know what I mean? It doesn't sting as much if we have the understanding of the others being trapped in their masks. Carl Jung said, the moral law arises from within. The one who looks outside dreams, but the one who looks inside awakens. Right? Ethics for him was not imposed. It was discovered through self-knowledge. Again. And I'll always say it, know thyself. And with that, you get to know others better too. Sometimes better than they know themselves. But also don't fall for wishful thinking and stuff like that. It's, it's not that easy. It's It requires vigilance also of your own psyche and defense mechanisms and wishful thinkings and spiritual bypassings and all of that. It requires constant vigilance and openness to oneself being wrong. That's just a natural learning process, the never-ending, ongoing growing up, right? Ralph Waldo Emerson carried this same light into the American spirit. He said, "Nothing can bring you peace but yourself. Nothing can bring you peace but the triumph of principles." To him, self-reliance was not selfishness. It was the discovery of the divine current within every individual. The moment you trust that inner law, you stop needing external approval. Your heart knows. Your heart knows. You just feel it when you're in the so-called higher truth, right? Just feels right. If you think something, if you believe something, if you act accordingly, your heart knows. More than the brain, let's say, better. It has a better understanding because heart doesn't have a ego and super ego and it and all of that. It doesn't have such filters or psychological defense mechanisms or anything. But people either forgotten or never learned in the first place to hear, to listen to the heart. I'm not saying don't use your brain. It has to be a healthy balance of a combination of heart and brain. Just saying not only brain. Heart is very important too, right? Walt Whitman, another one, turned that insight into poetry. He saw the sacred in every person, every leaf of grass. Do not ask the wounded person how he feels, he wrote. I myself become the wounded person. His democracy was spiritual, a recognition of shared being. We all have this in common, not only with fellow human beings, our brothers and sisters, but also with flora and fauna, plants and animals. They all have some levels of consciousness, some levels of empathy, just in different form. But as I also already said, all of life on this planet, we're all in the same boat. One should nurture the other and not just use it for its own benefits. I love that Native Americans, like, they had such beautiful before the Europeans came, right? They respected the natural balance And some of those tribes gave thanks to Mother Nature and the spirits and everything. They took what they needed from it, but with respect, and they never took more than they needed. That's the key there also, right? Most of those, not only Native Americans, all around the world, for tens of thousands of years, Mark Twain, in his sharp humor, unmasked hypocrisy, he said that kindness is the language the deaf can hear and the blind can see. Beneath his satire was a deep moral clarity, a knowing that genuine humanity doesn't need sermons. Just remembering who we are again. We are, most of us, are born good, and we still can be if we just remember who we were before all the traumas and the pain and the sufferings and the losses and all of that. Most personalities sadly become an output of the defense mechanisms, of the fears of enabling oneself to come to those situations where those traumas and pain and suffering and loss would repeat. And with every such trauma and stuff, it's like we're closing out every time a part of oneself. And what remains is barely human, right? We have to still learn resilience and still believe in other human beings, still trust, still in healthy manners, right? And the ones who deserve our trust and love and all of that. Yes. But many fall into those traps of false security and then just isolate their hearts and then wonder why they're unhappy. it's kind of trying to dance with 80 pounds of extra baggage. Of course, it takes time to learn, to understand, to get oneself again in a healthy way, and the world, and others, and all of that. But it's worth it. I always say it's worth it. Even if it takes 10 years, 15, 20, it gets easier. First steps are always the hardest, like in the first place, acknowledging something to oneself. To see it. And then to deal with it. Slowly but surely. As much as one can manage at any point in time. You can't rush it. You can't spiritually bypass it or something. It never works. It's just a parallel persona that you build them. But that's true growth stagnates them. And you just lose time. Anyway. Leo Tolstoy took the teachings of Christ out of the church and back into life. He said that law is the only law that cannot be broken without suffering. That violence and ownership corrupt the soul because they deny unity. He lived simply, not out of poverty, but conscience. Well, monetary poverty. Monetary poverty is tough, but I'd say spiritual poverty is way worse. Recently I watched some documentary on the worst slums in the world. In which conditions people live, it's for most people unthinkable. And yet they radiate. Not all, of course, but many of them just smile from the heart anyway. Not even knowing where the next meal is gonna come from, and if it's even gonna be healthy enough. Not to give them any disease or something. And yet, you see that they didn't forget themselves and the wonder of life and the beauty of the community they have, the love of their families, and of that they can still enjoy life in the worst possible conditions. So what does that say about us, mostly Westerners, spoiled brats we are, truly, and in many ways. That kind of happiness is the remembrance of self is maybe to answer one of my previous videos on what happiness is, that would be the closest thing, I think, as a definition. Dostoevsky the next one, explore the same truth in the darkest corners of the human soul. He showed that every moral law is written in the heart, that even the sinner and the depth of despair still carries a spark of divine recognition. His brothers Karamazov was not only about belief, it was about conscience. He knew that without inner freedom, other systems mean nothing. And in our own time, others have carried the same thread forward. I won't mention people like Viktor Frankl or I believe he's gone too much in the, or he overshoot it. I won't go into that, but many people, if not most people, that you see smiling and happy didn't have a perfect little life without any trauma. They just grew stronger from it and not lose themselves in the endless cycle of self-loathing and all of that. David Bohm, the physicist, saw dialogue itself as a sacred act, a way to reveal the wholeness already present between minds. He said, thought becomes destructive only when it forgets that it is part of the total movement of life. Joanna Macy speaks of the work that reconnects. She reminds us of that ecological renewal begins as a spiritual remembering, that the earth is not our environment, but our larger body. To act for life is to act for oneself, because there is no separation. That we're all in the same body. Speech, right? If we burn all the grass and cut down all the trees and such, that's it for us without oxygen, right? I mean, we're just in a way, we are different from the animal world, but biologically, as a so-called animal, these bodies, momentarily, temporarily, we need to make peace and even friendship with animals and plants and this whole planet, this whole Mama Pacha. Only then can we even be at peace with ourselves beyond a certain level of self-discovery and enlightenment, let's say. There has to be that. Experience of this unity. Vandana Shiva brings the same awareness into the field of justice. She says that the seed, the soil, and the water are living commons, not commodities to be owned. To exploit them is to violate the basic reciprocity that sustains existence. And yet, companies put their logos on water and call it theirs and sell it to us. How absurd is that? I also mentioned in one of the videos that no one owns that rain, that river, that mountain, that fertile soil, that animal, that sun. And yet we allowed ourselves to be sold that. The world allowed itself to be tricked like this, as if that's normal. Just because some people put some imaginary lines of these nations around the globe and called it my territory. It's like saying the flea on the dog owns the dog. How ridiculous is it? Right? No one owns land. We are here as Homo quasi sapiens. For a fraction of the existence of this planet. We're the new kids on the block still. And yet we own it. Really? We're just shepherds. Temporarily mutations, if you will. How much was it? 99% of all the species who lived on this planet are gone. We're the exceptions. And still, most don't appreciate that. Sad, right? There are surely 200 other voices, but let's keep it short. All these voices, from ancient sages to modern scientists, describe one continuous truth in different languages. That freedom and morality are not opposites. They are the same motion, seen from within and without. When outer authority fades, what remains is not chaos, but they try to sell us. It's the original harmony beneath all things. The golden rule is not a commandment, it's a memory. It's what life remembers when it's finally free. That's all we need. Awareness, freedom, autonomy, agency over our own lives and destinies. sovereignty over our own lifetimes and how we spend it. Integrity in knowing truly what and who we are, and recognize that in others, and treat each other with respect that we all want for ourselves too. That's all. That could be all of the law. And I mentioned those intentional communities again, thousands of them all around the world. They live by those principles, essentially, most if not all of them, just as remembered human beings. Fairness, harmony, sharing, and yes, there are disagreements, but no fights or even wars. Direct democracy. Everyone has truly a voice, and everything is done for the greater good in agreement, and they're always watching out not to infringe on anyone's own personal values or freedoms with that decisions. Of course, there has to be a balance, and sometimes it goes your way, sometimes it goes a way or another. But all in all, people are so much happier and freer and lighter. It can be done. We can do it. We can build this world for all of us, not just a handful. Everyone has what he needs or she. It could be so easy to do. Every few hundred years, sometimes even in a few decades, old systems and dogmas and paradigms are overthrown, and new ones, better ones, the ones that make more sense, come into place. They're never perfect, but they're better. Even if it goes slow sometimes. Even if some of us are feeling like they're born or they incarnated like 500 years too early or something. For some of us, we look around and feel like they would feel in the Dark Ages. But slowly but surely we're getting there. And it's in our hands every day to work in ourselves and our loved ones and our communities in the right directions. By asking questions at least, by informing people, by just being human. Just just by saying how it is, with love, even if it hurts. Those who care will take it seriously. Those who don't, well, don't bother. But all in all, if we can stop with those masks, we would be immediately, globally better off. And just by starting with this golden rule, not only with the first, but the second and third and fourth and fifth order effects of that immediately. You know? There's this one good quote from an alien being in an episode of Star Trek, The Next Generation. Alien who tested the crew of the Enterprise on humans. Quick to judge, slow to change. So true. But however slow that change is, as long as it's for the better, don't despair. Just keep at it. It'll be all worth it in the long run. All the pain, all the sufferings, all the discriminations and injustices and all of that was just there so we can learn from it and grow out of it, and hopefully never make those mistakes again. Love you, brothers and sisters.